Three lifelong friends, 6 trusty balls, and endless NFL takes. Welcome to Three Guys, 6 Balls NFL podcast.
Welcome everyone to Three Guys, 6 Balls, episode 3. We are back with another episode and more NFL talk today. And for those who are tuning in without video, Will is wearing his NFL, well, not NFL, his referee shirt today. He's not an NFL referee. That'd be cool if he were.
Not even close. I am a professional referee on the high school all the way down to Pee Wee. It is professional. All right. It pays money.
This man gets paid.
So from the varsity level all the way down to the Pee Wee level, I'm certified, licensed, apparently know the rules. I don't know. It's questionable. Whether I pulled them or not, that's what's questionable. But I am aware of them. Anyway, continue.
Well, it's fitting that you're wearing your referee jersey today because we're actually going to be talking about the proposed rule changes by some of the NFL teams that the owners are going to be talking about at the upcoming NFL owners meeting. These rules that are proposed, there's 3 rules and then 2 bylaws that the teams will be voting on. Just so everybody knows, these proposals, in order to be approved and to change the rule, 75% of the owners have to approve the rule. So that's 24 of the 32 owners have to approve this rule in order to make the change. So they're going to get together, have a meeting, and then vote on if they want these rules to take place in the upcoming NFL season. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through these rules one at a time. And at the end, we're going to vote as if we were NFL owners on if we would vote for or against these rules. We're going to start with the first one here, which is proposed by the Detroit Lions. And that is to eliminate an automatic first down as a penalty imposed for defensive holding and illegal contact. So let's go to Will on this one. I want to hear what you have to say first.
So we're talking about automatic first downs at all. I think are a bit excessive just in general. I think that when it's 3rd and 25 and a team throws up a prayer and they're hoping for the best and they get that pass interference. Now I know we're not talking about pass interference specifically, but pass interference, 15 yards on the field, it's 3rd and 25. They get the yards and automatic first down. You don't need all that, right? It is excessive. It is too heavily penalized, especially when it comes to defensive holding and illegal contact. Those are 5-yard penalties. At least pass interference is a spot foul in the NFL. In college, it's 15 yards. And so I guess you get your unnecessary references, all that kind of stuff, which are 15 yards. But in the NFL, you're moving the ball to wherever that happens. So if it's past the first down, sure, give it to them. If it's not, that's where you get the ball, replay the down. There are too many freebies for the offense. This game has shifted too far towards being offensive heavy. And it is because that's what sells. That's what people are there to see. They're there to see the ball get thrown. They're there to see the breakout runs, the deep passes. They want to see all that fun stuff. And then when it gets hindered by the defense, he kind of pulled his jersey a little bit, although that ball was thrown 10 miles over his head. So we're going to call it defensive holding rather than pass interference. 5 yards and an automatic first down is too much. You don't get an automatic first down for encroachment. You don't get it for offsides. I mean, you can just absolutely take out the offensive player. If you're a defensive lineman, you can jump early and just annihilate the offensive lineman on the other side of the ball, and it's a 5-yard penalty. That's it. But yet, when a corner kind of pulls a little bit on a jersey, all of a sudden it's 5 yards automatic first down because the skill player was hindered. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There's an example I found of a game from October 1st of 2023, which was between the Jets and the Chiefs. And so at this time in the game,
I already know who got the better end of this deal.
Yeah. You guessed it, the Chiefs. Who else would it be? It's not going to go against the Chiefs. So the Chiefs were winning at the time. They were up 23-20, but this was the final possession. So the Jets had actually just fumbled the ball away on their last possession, but they were trying to stop the Chiefs so that they could get the ball back and try to score so they could either tie or win the game. So what happened is it's 3rd and 20. Patrick Mahomes throws the ball and it's picked off. But then the referees wait until they see the interception and they call defensive holding. So then it's a first down. So the Chiefs get all those 20 yards. And so then the Chiefs go on to win the game, and the Jets didn't even have a chance to win the game because of a defensive holding call that just gave the Chiefs all those 20 yards instead of being a 3rd and 15 and you redo the down. To me, that just seems a little bit excessive when it's 3rd and 20. I've been researching a lot on this, and some people are saying that if you take away the automatic first down, that it's going to cause the defensive backs to hold more, which I think is not a very good argument, because if it's 3rd and 20, if they hold, then it's 3rd and 15. And then why would you purposely hold again so that they get closer and closer to the first down? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It seems a little bit excessive. So I get where the Lions are coming from on this one, and I see why they proposed it.
Well, meet them halfway. Instead of a 5-yard penalty, automatic first down, make it a 10-yard penalty, no first down. Right? That way, all holding across the board, whether it's offensive or defensive, doesn't matter who you are. If you hold, it's a 10-yard penalty.
I feel like defensive player morale has gone down the past, decade or so. I feel like anything you do just absolutely screws over your team. So I'm in favor. I mean, there's obviously the extreme examples where it's like, okay, this lost us the game. But also for the most part is like, I've just noticed so many more defensive players just like, dude, what can I do? Like, I'm in the position, I hit him, but I touched him the wrong way, or I accidentally grabbed him. When there's grabbing all the time, it's just one of those things where it's like, unless you get a pick or absolutely swipe the ball out of the guy's hands, like, you can't really do any good. All that to be said, I'm with Will as well. Honestly, both of you, I think we're all in agreement here that assigning a first down when you're already going to replay the down, it's like, dude, okay, you got 5 on us. Like, let's move on. We're not going to give you the first down. Because especially, I mean, if it's, 3rd and 15, 4th and 15, and you're doing that, trying to draw that, like, it's lucrative enough where teams might actually try to exploit that. Like, let's try to get them to get your hands on you, or to make them mess up. It's kind of the same deal with that, let's get them off sides on the 1 yard line. Although I think that's enough of kind of a staple of football where everyone's kind of okay with it. And it really does kind of come down to your own mental toughness. So, like, I think that's one of those things that I like. But stuff like this where it's like, dude, these two players are battling because one accidentally did this. You're gonna gift him the kitchen sink. I don't like that at all.
I don't think it's accidents. I agree with everything you said, except I don't think it's accidents. These players know when they're holding. They know when they've been beat, and they know they're like, okay, well, I'm going to hold. Just like offensive linemen. And I keep going back to that because that's what I know. Look at me. That's what I did. But you got beat by a defensive lineman who was way better than you, and so you grab him to save your quarterback. Same thing. That defensive guy got beat this one time because the offense cheats, because they know the snap count. They know where the play is going. They know the route. Defense is just out here guessing. And sometimes you guess wrong, and so you grab them. And that's not right, but the automatic first down is a bit extreme. If it were on the opposite foot and you were proposing loss of down penalties, the only one we see regularly is, good golly, it's this one here.
Intentional grounding?
Intentional grounding, thank you. Yeah, the thing. Intentional grounding, right? That comes with loss of down because that quarterback is trying to throw it away to not get sacked. Well, you got the sack and you lost it down anyway because it doesn't make sense to not, because you threw it away. If they were to start proposing loss of down penalties for holding rather than, and additionally leave the automatic first down in, to where if your offensive line held and then you lost the down because it probably would have been a sack or spot foul, lost it down like intentional grounding, you'd see a lot more people up in arms about it because, that's too, you can't penalize that heavily. They do it on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think going back to what Avery said is if an offensive line blocks long enough on like a 3rd and 15 or a 4th and 15 or whatever it is, there's going to be holding. If they block long enough, there's going to be holding every time.
Every single time.
And then I agree with you, Will. If they're going to keep this in play where the defense gets penalized and it's an automatic first down for defensive holding, there needs to be some sort of penalty that's for the offense. Everything is in favor of the offense nowadays. And so whether it's pass interference or whatever it is, you have to have that loss of down if you're going to continue to do this to the defense to make it fair. Let's take a vote. I think I know what everybody's going to say, but Avery, what would you vote for or against this rule?
Absolutely for.
Will?
Where I'm very for this rule.
I'm for as well. All right, so we'll move on to the next rule. This next one is proposed by the Green Bay Packers. This is to prohibit an offensive player from pushing a teammate who is lined up directly behind the snapper and receives the snap immediately at the snap. Or in other words, the tush push. Let's start with Avery on this one.
I don't feel as passionately about this one as I do the other ones, but I remember as a kid asking, I'm like, man, can't you guys just build like a shield wall and just like have the running back behind and just everyone push, and or for a block, to block a kick, can't one player get leverage on another and jump up if it's your own teammate? And it's like, nah, you can't do that. And so for that reason, I think it's a little, I don't know. To be fair, most of the time, I'm not a big fan of those. Like, if you can find a way to just like automatically get a yard or two by just like bum rushing on that snap count. Because like Will said, the offense knows exactly what's happening. The defense doesn't. And for the same reason, you don't get a running start, like you do in arena football. I'm not a huge fan of it because it kind of takes away from, like, I don't know, the game. I guess I just don't like seeing that. But like I said, because the injury rate is extremely low or non-existent, I mean, there's not really a player safety reason. But I would hate to see, someone finding an exploit like this in order to get a few extra yards kind of guaranteed. And then everyone starts doing this. And then we just see these just kind of just pushes rather than, a real drawn-up play. But like I said, I don't feel as passionately about this one. I would probably, if I was one of the owners, I'd probably just go along with the popular sentiment. But part of this sounds like a little bit of like a salty team, that got beat on this. But I guess unless there's no way for the defense to counter this when they know it's coming and it's almost an automatic result, like if that's the case, then like I'm kind of against it just because we want to balance the game. But if it's just like, hey, this just got kind of introduced or it's just now becoming more prevalent and we just don't like it, then I'm not a big fan of changing it.
Well, before you get into stats here, because I know you're just full of numbers for this one. I know you're full of numbers. So allow me to get into this from the technical side, from the referee side. The way this rule is written, and I'm going to reread it even though you just read it, Joel, it's to prohibit an offensive player from pushing a teammate who is lined up directly behind the snapper. And for those that don't know, the snapper is more informally known as the center. You cannot push a teammate who is lined up directly behind the snapper and receives the snap immediately at the snap. Okay, so we've got some key words here. You cannot be lined up directly behind the snapper. You cannot receive the snap, and it has to be immediate. Okay, so first off, immediate is completely subjective. That is up to the referee's discretion what immediate is. If the quarterback, rules-wise, the snap receiver, receives the snap and then stands all the way up and then goes into it, is that okay? Because that's no longer immediate. The act did not happen immediately. So are we just delaying the tush push? And then again, if you receive the snap, you have a player lined up directly beside you. The only thing that puts them in the backfield is that their head, actually no part of their body can cross the plane of the snapper center, their waistline. So long as your fullback can stand right next to you and they do not cross the belt of the center, they're officially in the backfield. So you can have your fullback or your big beefy defensive tackle standing right beside you with another big beefy defensive back right behind them. You can hand them the ball and those two can Jamaican bobsled this thing down the hole, right? So you're taking the play from the A gap and you're moving it to the B gap. That's all you're doing. Every single NFL team has people on their staff to circumvent these rules. This does nothing. This rule change does nothing. All it's doing is protecting quarterbacks. This rule is, okay, I don't want my quarterback to do this anymore, so we need to ban this. I need to have somebody else put their head and body in the middle of that rugby scrum. That way it's no longer my quarterback, my 25% of my cap space who's getting hurt. Let's have somebody else get hurt. We obviously don't care about running backs anyway. Let's give it to them.
I like that perspective from a referee there, because I actually didn't look at the wording. I was just focused on the tush push, and that was about it. I didn't look at the wording, so I actually really like that perspective.
It is worded very specifically for a reason. It is worded this way because it's proposed by Green Bay, which means that the Packers already have 10 or 12 different packages on how to make this effective without it being a tush push. They already know. They already know how they're going to use it next season, and nobody else has it figured out yet. You don't propose this unless you already know how to use it next year.
Well, here's what I found interesting, too, is Avery mentioned that It's almost like the team that proposed it had it used against them in some like big game or something where it made a difference. I mean,
Consistently.
as far as I can remember, I mean, I'm not an Eagles or Packers fan, so I don't watch all their games, but as far as I can remember, I don't remember any specific game where the Packers got beat by the Eagles because of the tush push. So I find it interesting that they're the team that proposed this. Just a thought, but as Will mentioned, I do have some stats. The Eagles were successful on 28 of 34 attempts last season, which is 82%. So there's the first thing is it is stoppable. It's not 100% conversion rate. You can stop it. Then there's a quote here from the Commanders linebacker, Bobby Wagner. He said, "It's a great concept, great play, hard to stop. If I was them, I would run it too." So here's my question. Why don't other teams just run it too? I know not every team has a quarterback that can squat 600 pounds, but why don't they just run it too? If they don't like it, just run it.
I mean, they basically do, right? 4th and 1, and it's not Jalen Hurts. What's that play called?
QB sneak.
It's called a QB sneak. It's the same play, just nobody's shoving their hands on the underside of somebody else's glutes, giving them the good old 1-2 squeeze. That's the way that's the one.
Can you guys guess who is one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history at the QB sneak? Tom Brady. He is one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history at the QB sneak. Brady has the most conversions on 3rd and 4th and 1, which is 124. And these are stats from 2023, by the way. So he has the most conversions on 3rd and 4th and 1 on quarterback runs, and he has the second highest conversion rate, which is 90.5% since 2000. And that's with a minimum of 50 attempts. There was only one quarterback who had a higher conversion rate. Do you guys think you can guess who it is?
All time or when?
Since 2000. Played for the Jaguars, I'll give you a hint.
Blaine Gabbert.
Oh.
Trevor?
No, it's not Trevor.
Byron Leftwich.
Oh, is it? Oh, what's his name with the mustache?
Mustache, yeah, jorts. Gardner Minshew.
No. It's
I don't
David
know any other
Gerard.
quarterback that... I do, yeah.
You exhausted all of my Jaguar quarterback
I was
knowledge.
gonna say, I was like, I don't know if any other Jaguars played for them for the last 20 years.
He played for the Jaguars, right? I'm not wrong.
David
am I?
Gerard. No, I'll believe it.
He did, yeah. I remember that.
Okay, I was
It
going to
was
say,
a long time ago.
you said Byron Leftwich, and I was like, wait, did I get the wrong quarterback? And there's also players like Drew Brees, who had, in 2023, he had the 3rd highest conversion percentage and the 3rd most 3rd and 4th and 1 conversions since 2000 by quarterback. I'm sure that's changed now. Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen are probably above him, but I didn't get those stats. So these are from 2023. But there's proof of 2 quarterbacks who are not runners, who do not squat 600 pounds, Tom Brady and Drew Brees, 2 of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, but they are not known for running. But they are 2 of the best quarterbacks in NFL history at running the QB sneak. To me, I mean, it's just not really that much different of a play. Like, if you can't stop the QB sneak against Tom Brady and Drew Brees, you probably can't stop the tush push either.
So the thing with the QB sneak, I mean, and it's only like a minor fraction, is the element of surprise. Right? When eventually you get to a point where you know it's coming. But the formation usually... Exactly. You get to usually a single back formation, and the quarterback just dives on the hip out on whatever side the defensive tackle is shaded to. The quarterback dives the other side, and they just hope that they can get their entire 6 feet. For Drew Brees, he had to extend his arms a little bit. For most of the other quarterbacks, they just put the ball at their head and hope for the best. So with the tush push, the thing is that everybody knew it was coming. So you get this. I mean, basically, you get 22 people. We'll call it what, 18 receivers and corners stay out a bit. You get 18 people that all jam into one small section. And so it's just a lot of man meat that are there pushing each other around. Jason Kelsey said, I think this isn't a direct quote, but I'm pretty sure he said it was his least favorite play. He hated it. But of course he would. He's the one that snapped the ball, and he was at the bottom of that pile every time. I would hate it too.
Before we move on to the next one here, let me just read this quote. It's from Mark Schlereth, who played on the defensive side of the ball. So he says, "Here's my issue with tush push and why I think it should be banned. You can't do it on the defensive side. If you lined up on the defensive side of the ball with linebackers sitting behind defensive tackles and linebackers shoving defensive tackles through the line of scrimmage, I think that's illegal. You can't do it. So why is it okay for the offensive side of the ball to be able to do that, but the defense or special team side of the ball can't do it? If it's about player safety, if I line up on the defensive side and I have somebody shoving a defensive tackle through there and a quarterback gets hurt, guess what the league will do? They'll ban it. This is a problem that's endemic in the National Football League in general. All the rules are bent towards offensive success. So there's kind of a case against the tush push, just to throw that in there. Again, same thing with the defensive holding. Like if you're gonna have a rule like that on the defensive side, there should be a rule like that on the offensive side.
Well, and to add another feather into that cap, in 2009, the NFL banned the use of the wedge formation on kick returns, right? So where you can only have two players, and you can't link arms anymore. They used to have their whole team, well, not the whole team, but they used to have a set of hogs back there that would all link arms, and the returner would get behind them, and they would run that way. But it was a player safety thing. And so that's why the kickoff has changed so much too. So you don't have people just ramming heads into each other immediately. They do a lot of stuff for player safety, and this is one that they should consider.
I agree. So with all that being said, let's take a vote. We'll start with Will on this one. Would you vote for or against banning the tush push?
I understand all I have said. I am actually against banning the tush push.
Avery?
I'd say after hearing you guys, I think I kind of changed my mind. I was kind of a soft yes for allowing it, but now I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe, I mean, as of right now, I guess I'd say no. Like, if the defense really can't find a creative way to either stop it or neutralize it, then maybe we revisit it. But if it's something where it's like, hey, we know it's coming now, and then we'll kind of gear our defense around it, I'd generally like to just see the league be able to, like, counter it naturally. So I guess I'd be against it.
I would vote against banning the tush push just because if other teams want to do it, then they can do it. And there's no significant evidence that points towards injuries on this play. So I think that's kind of a big thing for the league right now is preventing injuries, but this play hasn't really resulted in a ton of injuries. So
I think they came out and said there are no recorded, and maybe it's major,
there's none.
No recorded major injuries that have happened because of this play. Zero.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, and of the two that we've talked about so far, we're talking about a 1 yard play or a 5 yard penalty automatic first down. One of them is way more impactful than the other. Leave, whatever. Who cares about the tush push? You're getting 1 yard. Whatever.
I agree. Speaking of the tush push, let's go to the third one, which is proposed by the Philadelphia Eagles. Their proposal is to align the postseason and regular season overtime rules by granting both teams an opportunity to possess the ball regardless of the outcome of the first possession, subject to a 15-minute overtime period in the regular season. Will, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, how else do I say that? All right, you don't win your coin toss, you play defense. You want the ball, play defense. All right, we have just spent the first, I don't know how long in this podcast so far, talking about how, man, the game's too easy for the offense. Well, I'm going to flip the script here a bit. Okay, if you want the ball back, you lose the coin toss. You want the ball back, play defense. Josh Allen's 13 seconds in overtime. Okay, well, you think I forgot to touch the ball? Okay, well, play defense. Play defense. Have your defense play better than their offense, and you get the ball. And have your offense play better than their defense, and you win. We should not be penalizing teams for scoring. They've already changed the rules to where if it's a field goal, then both teams get the ball because we all want a chance to win. Okay, who cares? Have your team stop the other team, and then you're fine. Have your team play better than theirs, but they've already played for 60 minutes. Okay, well, now you have to play for more. Couldn't do it during regulation, and now here you are in overtime, and now you want extra handouts because you couldn't win in regulation? Too bad. Get over it. Too bad.
Well, I'm actually going to go against that a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and vote now. So I'm actually going to vote that this be put into play because it doesn't make any sense to me why you would suddenly change the rule. You go through this whole season where you have these rules, and then when you get into the playoffs, you suddenly change the rules. That doesn't make any sense to me. If you're going to have it in the playoffs, you should have it in the regular season because when the regular season is happening, especially when you get towards the end of the regular season, you're preparing for the playoffs. So if you're going to have it in the playoffs, you should have it in the regular season as well. It's different, but it's similar to how I feel about college and with the 1 foot in bounds rule. Like, I think in college, they should make it 2 feet in bounds because it doesn't make any sense to me that I know you're playing at a lower level, but when you're playing in college, you get the touchdown by getting 1 foot in bounds. And then as soon as you get to the NFL, the rule changes. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think it should be the same regardless of when you're playing, where you're playing. So I think if you're going to have this rule in the postseason for overtime rules, you should put them in play in the regular season as well.
I don't think it should be in play in the postseason either. Sorry, Avery, I just wanted to slip that in there.
You're good. You're good.
If you go back 10 seconds, same argument I just made, make it for the postseason too. You made it all the way this way, play defense. Avery, your turn. Sorry.
I actually have a different take than all three of you. All three of us. All five.
I have made 2 points. You're right.
All five of them, I've got a different opinion than. Kind of like with soccer, I saw somewhere, and I'm making a point here. It can end in a tie so easily in the regular season, but then of course when it comes to a championship, they have a shootout. I am fundamentally against ties. I hate it. I feel like they wasted everybody's time. We came here to compete, and then we all left as friends. It was about the friends we made along the way. It's basically, you might as well have just canceled the game because it just goes into the draw column, and I hate it. And the thing is, it's the same thing here where it's like, why are we putting it in the playoffs but not the regular season? Do the regular season games not matter as much? And Joel, to your point about the feet and bounds, again, it's kind of one of those things where if they do it or don't do it, it's not that big of a deal. But I'm actually cool with it being 1 foot in college, the same way I'm cool with the 3-point line being further back in the NBA. It's like, you're professionals now. We're going to up the ante a little bit. So I kind of like it just because I watch a lot of college football, and some of the plays and catches that are made that kind of like you can't do with 2 feet. Like, you're basically all the way reached out and you get 1 foot in. I think it just adds a different element to it, and I like that variation. But with this, I think that, and based on these next rule changes coming up, you'll see what I'm saying. I feel like we should go the college route here, and I feel like they should just make it basically, we're going back and forth. You each get it at whatever, the 50, the 40-yard line, and you go through it. And then if you both score, we do it again. And then this time you got to go for 2. And then eventually it's just 2-point conversions. It's the same reason I'm not a fan of a kicker winning a game. I'm like, you brought in some extra guy that hasn't been really part of this whole battle to kick a ball through the uprights to win the game for everyone else. It's like, why don't we just have a coin toss? Why don't we have 2 babies race to their mother and see who crosses the finish line? Neither of them really had much of an impact on the game. I mean, they were in the stands. The babies could have been cheering, which could have helped the teams. But I just feel like I'm not a fan. And I understand Will's point as far as like, dude, you got yourself in this pickle. You don't really have a lot of leverage. You should have just won the game in regulation, but you didn't. But at the same time, I want to see more football. The same kind of sentiment as those B-dubs commercials. Let's send this to overtime. Let's keep this party rolling. Because I don't think anybody who isn't actually enjoying the game ever has a problem with the game going longer. Like, if you just want to get back home, go home. You know, if you don't care anymore, that's fine. But, like, I want to see the guys that have been competing continue to compete. Like, if it was basketball and we're watching the NBA Finals in overtime, but instead they make it like we're actually just going to do a 3-point shoot-a-thon, and if the first person goes and makes it, then the game's over. Like, what are we doing? Like, I want to see equal chances. I don't like excuses, and I feel like the current setup leaves a lot of room for excuses. Like, well, we didn't even get to touch the ball. And I kind of want to get to a point where it's like, because for me, personally, if I'm competing against someone in basketball or something, and I get beat, it's one of those reality checks where I'm like, he physically beat me. But if we're playing Mario Kart and you got the blue shell and you hit me just because I was in first, I'm like, this is a little dumb. Or if we play some other game in D&D or something and I roll the number and I lost because I rolled that number, it's like, I'm not a big fan of the luck aspect. But I understand that it's kind of a different thing altogether. It's not really about that. But I want to have no excuses, and I want to see which team is better. And I'm talking about like the actual stars of the team. I want to see them play. So I say, like, no to this rule. I say, let's go back to the drawing board and do it right. Do it college style.
To add on to your point, I think they should do it soccer style. I know I made a big old yuck sound when you said soccer, but I think shootout's great. Line up both kickers. You gotta go match for match. All right? Coin toss. First, you're up. You get to pick where you kick from. You're playing horse out here. He makes, you make it, he has to make it.
You can do trick shots. You can go into the stands And you're like, hey,
Sure.
you can spin it up, and then
Do
you
it.
got to kick it, and you got to call it first. You know, if you don't make
Do
it,
perfect
they
style.
get a shot.
Whoever makes the double doink.
All-Star
Cody,
weekend.
I was just saying, get Cody
No,
Parkey
Pro
out here. A double doink, it in. Yeah.
Yeah. Avery had some good points, though. I actually would love to see the college rules in the NFL for overtime. I think that'd be exciting. Then you have no excuse.
Players.
Yeah, then you have no excuse of not getting the ball because you're going to get it every time.
I don't hate that. As big of a stink as I put up about it, if keeping it the same way they have it, where coin toss kickoff, we score a touchdown because we went 75 yards, well, I guess 80 yards, 75, I don't know, who cares? We went the whole length of the field and then scored, and now it's your turn to get the ball because it's all equal and everybody gets a participation trophy. No.
Yeah.
But if they were to line it up and do it college style, where they line up on the 25 and going in, I mean, I think they should go 25 and in, no first downs. 25 yards on 4 plays, you're kicking a field goal. Add an extra element to it, just to make it a bit more challenging.
All right, so let's get into our vote. So I already voted. I would be for changing this rule. Bill, what would you vote?
I think this one's pretty obvious. I am against changing this rule. I understand why they need it in overtime or in the postseason, because the game can't end in a tie. And again, you get to playoffs and you have more views, you have more eyes on your screen. When it's the Jets versus the Browns, week 3, and it's not even aired locally, and it's going to overtime, nobody's watching that game. So nobody cares. But at the playoff time, you want those eyes on the screen, you want this commercial money, you want all that stuff. And that's all this really comes to, is money and getting more eyes on your screen. But I think that it is stupid all around, and they should never have put it in the playoff either. So no.
I'm gonna go ahead and say no, only because I think the worse the playoff rules get, the more people will come around to the college system. And if we do this little Band-Aid fix right now, we're not going to get there. So I say let it burn until we're ready to recognize the fire and rebuild it right.
Okay. All right, so those were the 3 rules. So now we're going to get into the 2 bylaw proposals. So this one is proposed by the Detroit Lions. And so this one says to amend the current playoff seeding format to allow wildcard teams to be seeded higher than division champions if the wildcard team has a better regular season record. So I'm going to go ahead and start on this one because I want to point out the playoff seeding last year was Lions, Eagles, Bucks, and Rams as the 4 division winners. And then you have the Vikings as the 5, Commanders as the 6, and Packers as the 7 seed. If this rule would have been in place last season, the Lions and Eagles still would have been 1-2, but the Vikings would be the 3 seed. The Commanders would be the 4 seed. So they both would have gotten home games even though they didn't win their division. So then the Packers would have been 5, Bucks would have been 6, and the Rams would have been 7. Really, I mean, the biggest change there is the Vikings and Commanders move up, and the Packers move up too, but the Buccaneers and the Rams move down to the bottom. So here's what would have been the playoff matchups in the first round if that was the case. The Eagles would have played the Rams, the Vikings would have played the Bucks, and the Commanders would have played the Packers. Now, there's a whole number of different ways that those games could have played out. But if all of the top seeds would have won, the Lions would have played the Commanders in the next round anyway, the team who they lost to. And I don't know if that is the reason why the Lions proposed this, because they're bitter about losing to the Commanders, who were a better team than the Bucks and Rams, and they were seated lower. But if that would have played out in that scenario, they would have played the Commanders anyway.
I think I'm in favor of it, just because I've always felt like the seeding kind of makes it you just against your division rather than you against the conference or even the rest of the NFL. I was kind of sick of seeing these like 8-8 teams or 9-7 teams, back when it was 16 games, and it was just,
Beast
you
mode.
just see them up above. So yeah. And you just see them ranked, seated higher. I just didn't like that. I think, okay, I'm already not a huge fan of divisional rivals to a degree. I do like that, like, you have these rivals and you're guaranteed to play them twice a year, home and away. But I don't
the college football fan.
Yeah, like, I like the rivalry, but I don't like that it's like we just have to beat out these teams. Like the Patriots making it every year because their division was just garbage. And it's like, Okay, I like it as far as just securing a place. You know, I guess it like kind of like March Madness that's going on right now. Like you win your conference, there's 32 conferences in college basketball. You win your conference, you get a seat at the dance. But you're still seeded based on your strength. So like when it actually comes down to the bracket, you're getting the right matchups. You're getting those good matchups. And same with college football. I think they kind of fumbled it this year because the seeding is just ridiculous. You got Oregon and Ohio State playing in the second round. It's like this should be a championship game level matchup.
They did that on
Of
purpose.
course, I would have loved it if. Yeah, but also Ohio State was like, we're looking weak, but yeah. But I guess my point is I don't like it being like we just have to worry about these three teams. Like, no, I want you to be the best you can possibly be, and your, reward will be recognized. Like we will seed you higher. So I was also thinking about because sometimes if you do play in a crappier conference, you're playing crappier teams, which is going to make your record look better. Part of me, and I think this might just be too convoluted, but I like the idea of it, is if they had like kind of a strength of schedule that kind of altered by the end of the year, like, hey, who were the better teams? And if you beat them, there's some sort of point value assessed. So it's basically like, hey, we're going to grade you by your record, but if there's any tiebreakers, we're looking at strength of schedule. But then again, unlike college, where you can kind of change conferences to decide your fate, in NFL, you really can't. So you are kind of just at the mercy of it, which means that other teams that have to play in harder divisions are also at the mercy of it. So I kind of like the idea of like, hey, maybe there's some sort of, scoring system as far as like ranking them if you have the same record as somebody. But I think that might just be too much for this point.
Yeah, I'm actually going to disagree a little bit with you, Avery, because I think that okay, that sums up my opinion.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody.
So yeah, I'm going to disagree because I think that when you have your divisions, I mean, that's probably not going to change. That's not a proposed rule, at least this year. But when you have your divisions, there has to be some sort of reward for winning your division. So if there's
making the playoffs, you make the playoffs if you win it.
Not necessarily. I mean, well, yes, you do if you win it, but you can also make the playoffs without winning your division.
Right.
But when you win your division, you're rewarded with a home game. So I just feel like if they take that away, it's going to kind of defeat the purpose of the divisions a little bit and kind of not make those division games as exciting, because those division games mean a lot. They don't always mean a lot, but a lot of the time they're set up that they really do mean a lot. And I think that if you take this away, those games aren't going to mean as much and it's not going to be as exciting. So I just feel like that they need to keep it in place because of that. And the only way that I would vote for this is if, regardless of what seed you are, like if you don't win your division, you can be seeded higher than me, but I'm going to get the home game if I won my division. That would be the only way that I would vote for it, is if, even if you're seeded lower, if you won your division, you're still getting a home game.
And that seeding wouldn't matter at that point.
Exactly.
Sorry, I just want to respond to that real quick. I think the reward is making the playoffs. I think if it would be one thing if your home game was against someone else in the division, but to get a leg up on somebody because you played in a weaker division, and maybe they had a great team in their division, but they they have a better record than you, but they didn't win their division, they don't get home team, but they still did better overall in the season. I feel like they deserve it a little bit more. And the reason I kind of bring it up is like, okay, you win and then someone else is affected by that. That's like saying, hey, I get to live here because someone promised me this land 3,000 years ago. And I know you weren't part of that deal, but I get it because of that. But I just think it shouldn't affect the other divisional players. I think that you should be rewarded based on winning games, not winning the right games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking up some stats here. Okay, so thank you for responding to that, Avery. I think it was very pertinent. I'm actually more on the side of Joel here rather than Avery. I mean, if we were to go away with it, then we should go away with the divisions, right? Just do it. Well, they don't. Basketball, this or NBA doesn't do this, but basically you've got your 16 teams, and you put the best 7 of them in the playoffs. Doesn't matter who you are or where you are. It would be a scheduling nightmare, but that's just kind of the way it is. Everybody becomes at large. The best person in the conference, best team in the conference gets their first round bye, and then the next 6 after that fight it out in the playoffs. Doesn't matter based on record. Yeah. And the reason they don't do that, and the reason that, in the NFC East, you haven't had a repeat winner in the last, 22 years or something like that
I think
now?
it's since like 01 to 04 when the Eagles did it 3 times in a row.
Yep. It's because your first place team in the division gets a first place schedule. So the following year, you're designated which divisions, which conferences, and which divisions you're going to play against, but not specifically who. And so the Eagles this year will play against the first place teams of the other divisions. And so you play a harder schedule based on your divisional ranking. That's why you don't see, I don't know what the number is specifically, it's incredibly hard to repeat as division winner because you're playing other division winners who seemingly have great teams. And so you just have a harder schedule. So I think with that, you should be rewarded. You get first place in your division, you play your first place schedule. Yeah, sure, you're 8-8, but you also played a harder schedule than, say, a wild card team, let's say the Buccaneers, right? They barely squeaked in the playoffs. They won their division, yada, yada. They were not better than, record-wise, the Vikings. But the Vikings didn't play as hard a schedule because the Buccaneers won the division last year, too. And so, on paper, the Buccaneers won it 2 years in a row, which means they played a first-place schedule, so they played a harder schedule than the Vikings, and still won. Wait, did the Vikings win the division 2 years ago? Who cares? The point still stands. That when you play a first-place schedule and still end up in first place in your division, you should be rewarded for that specifically. And that's why it's incredibly hard to repeat as a division champ, division winner. Calling it division champ's a bit excessive, but as your division winner. So I am against this because this, again, falls into the participation trophy side to me. You are just out here, well, we had a better record than them, even though we didn't play as good, and it is good, but we're not as good as other people, so we should be better than them because we are, but we're not better than the people we need to be better than. Okay, Vikings, I know the Vikings didn't propose this, the Lions proposed it, which is really surprising to me, because they won their division, and they got first place. And so, they should be a big old who cares. But still, get over it. Going back to what I just said, if you want to win the NFL game in overtime, play defense. You want to win your division, you want to get a home playoff game, win your division. And that's just, play better. And it's easy to say, sitting here in a ref shirt, talking on a podcast, and not out there doing it. But still, do better.
I actually didn't know that about the scheduling. I'd be curious. And I know you just brought it up as a, just loose example about the Bucs and the Vikings. I'd be curious to know, how much, kind of look at the numbers. This might be a Joel task. Of as far as, how much, from the season that they won the division title to the next season, seeing that there's no repeats. I'd love to see, the actual kind of strength of schedule that actually has, on, every season starting over. But in general, still, I guess I can see how, that does affect it. But that kind of goes back into that, kind of power rankings as far as, okay, who actually had the tougher schedule. And maybe the NFL does a good job of trying to keep it as, even as possible. Especially because, it's hey, we're going to put you up against the harder teams. What team? The season hasn't started yet. Who's the best team? So you don't even know. There could be roster shakeups. You lose a good player. How does the NFL even decide, who's best? Do they look at NFL.com and look at power rankings, way too early power rankings? Oh, they're going to be good, so we'll schedule them here. So it's a little bit kind of convoluted, but I do think that Will's point, I think it makes a good case. I just need to look into it some more. So my vote is still yeah, I'm down for the rule change, but hesitantly.
Yeah, I would vote against this, but I want to make just a quick case against my own case. So, home games in the playoffs don't matter. They don't. And maybe this is a bad example because of who the team is, but the Dallas Cowboys, not this last season, but the season before, I know it's a bad example, but not last season, but the season before, they won every single home game in the regular season, and then they go into the playoffs against the Packers at home, and they get destroyed. Home games in the playoffs don't matter, so that's just a quick case against my own case there, but I would still vote against this rule. So let's get into the last one.
I'm against it. I didn't get to cast my vote. Sorry, I wanted to slip that in there.
Sorry, you said it earlier.
It wasn't obvious enough.
Yeah.
You said it earlier, so I figured you were.
Oh,
Will
well,
hates it. He
I hate
hates it. He would kill it if it
avidly
was a
against
person.
it.
If this rule change was a person, murdered.
I'd consider
You can
paying
say it.
somebody else for it.
That's going on Instagram.
Great.
Okay, so let's get into the last one, which is also proposed by the Detroit Lions. So this one is to exclude from the 90-player limit a player placed on reserve/injured before or on the day of the roster reduction to 53 players, unless such player is designated for return. So Will, would you mind just kind of explaining that to our listeners for a minute?
Yeah, sure. We did a real good job of saving the worst for last year.
We can make this one briefer.
Yeah, honestly, we really can. So what this is saying is that on August 27th, the NFL has to cut their off-season roster from 90 down to 53. And they're saying this, what's being proposed is that if you have a player on injured reserve on or before August 27th, you do not have to count them as part of your active roster if they're on injured reserve and they are not going to return this season. If they're going to return this season, then they have to be on your roster. But if you have a person injured during OTAs, minicamps, even part of preseason, I believe, even part of preseason, and they tear their ACL and they're out for the whole season, you can put them on injured reserve for the whole season, and they do not count against your active 53-man roster, but you do get to keep I call it their rights and their contract on your books. Actually, it gets deferred the way the NFL money works. It's all just fake. That contract that money gets deferred. That player stays on your team but not on your roster, so nobody else can claim them. Because if your players over 53 that you keep up to 90, the rest of them go on your practice squad, but any team can claim them at any time. And so you want to keep this person on your roster for next season when they're going to come back. But for this season, they're going to be out, so they don't want to be counted against your active roster, but also you don't want anybody else to claim them. I don't know if I did any amount of good job explaining it or not. I said a lot of words, so here we are.
Wait, so this rule doesn't have any impact on the regular season?
No. So if your player gets hurt and they're not going to return this season, this bylaw change, it's not really a rule change, this bylaw change would mean that nobody else can claim them, and they also don't count as a member of your active roster.
It makes sense. I mean, just from the standpoint of, especially seeing the NFL as a business. It's like, look, we can keep this guy on, and we can allow someone else to come in and contribute and prove themselves.
Bingo.
Like, just from, I feel like even for the most part, I'm like, hey, why not even extend that number? Like, is maybe there's something I'm not seeing, but if you're like still tight on players, like we don't have the depth here, it's like, okay, this is a massive opportunity to open the doors more. It's not like guys are going to lose their job. You still have the best players on your team, but allowing them to go out and get more, I just see that as a win for everybody. It's like, hey, you're already making money. Let's let some more people in here. You get better depth at the position. You don't have these teams that are just suffering like that. Plus, you can let these guys not have to worry about it. And plus, no team should mind about that at all. If they are basically redshirted that whole season, who cares if they're not part of their thing? It's just a contractual issue.
Yep. One thing I think this will have an effect in Joel, is that you won't see near as many week 15, week 14 returns. You won't see that anymore. Okay, if this goes through, you won't see your player get their ACL, MCL, Achilles, whatever torn in the offseason, and then, they're going to come back week 15 for the playoffs. Well, we've already designated that roster spot to Jim Bob over here. You can't come back now. You are not designated to return this entire season. You just won't see the late ads because they're going to want that roster spot for somebody else.
Yeah, so the reason I asked about the regular season impact is because the Lions were the one who proposed this, and during the regular season, so on December 16th of last year, they had 21 players who were on injured reserve. So, I mean, that still may have something to do with it, because one of those players was Aiden Hutchinson, and there was all this talk about him coming back for the Super Bowl, which ultimately they didn't make. But, so I guess now they don't, if this goes through, I mean, they wouldn't have to technically bring him back, right? Is that correct?
Right, but he couldn't come back for the whole season.
Okay, so if they don't, then he would be able to play the entire next season.
Yeah. If your player, and it says here the very last line is, unless such player is designated for return. And return means this season. If you're going to come back this season, then you have to hold that roster spot. You only now have 52 players and one injured player. So you have to hold that roster spot for them if they're going to come back. But if they're not coming back, that roster spot can go to somebody else.
I'd be blown away if anyone had an issue with this or if anyone voted against it. Because
Yeah,
it doesn't,
should...
especially with that Aiden Hutchinson example, it's like, hey, now we're basically telling you, you don't have to like keep tabs on this player your whole season if you're worried about facing him at the end of the season. It's like, it's just done. They can retain him and pay him if they want, but you know exactly who's on the roster now. And I think that's great. It's like you can keep them on, but you also aren't surprising any other teams with bringing them back last second. It's just, hey, if they're out, you can just keep them over here and fill it with somebody else. Because either way, I mean, the next season, now they have a decision to make. You know, when he's back and you filled that spot, it's like you got to cut one of them, you know? So I think it's one of those things where it's like, it kind of just goes on to the team. It doesn't really give anyone an unfair advantage at all.
This gets more players on an NFL field, building their tape, allowing them to continue their careers. I think this is a good change. Joel, anything to add, or should we just put this one to vote?
No, let's go ahead and put it to vote. So I would vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Wait.
Aye.
All right, well, I guess we're doing it then.
Cool.
We'll let the owners know that we've decided, and they can go ahead and
3 guys with 6 balls have decided.
The owners are definitely going to take the opinions of 3 guys, 6 balls.
Here's the problem. This should be unanimous, but it's going to be 31-1, and we all know who that one is. And it's just going to be, yeah, you know, it's Jerry. We all know. Jerry's going to be like, I don't want to bring anybody else in. Hey, come on, get over it.
All right, well, there you have it. Those are the rule changes that are proposed by the NFL teams that will be voted on at the NFL owners meeting this offseason. And again, just so everybody knows, 24 of the 32 owners have to approve these rules in order for them to take effect. So we will see what happens, but that is all that we have time for today. Remember, throughout this week, to keep your balls played with. We'll be back next week for an NFL mock draft with the NFL draft coming up in April. So we will see you then. That's all we have for today.